All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode of the Cobham Crew podcast. That's right, we're back with Phil at Chelsea Youth. Going to give a little bit of another summer update right as the boys have left Cobham officially in the United States by the time you're listening to this big time. Phil, how is your summer going?
It's pretty busy. Last time we spoke, it was the end of last season. This presumably kicks off the start of the new season. As you say, the men's first team are now stateside, and the development squad are going to get into action tonight, Tuesday night, in the UK, the first of their preseason friendlies. So, as we like to say, it's all beginning again.
Here we go. Run it back, as you'd imagine. Well, we've got some good stuff to chat and update ourselves about. Obviously, not only do we have preseason going on, there's 8 new scholars in the academy. Talking about some of the new, we could say younger signings that the club have made recently. Some loans for some players that have left the academy temporarily, and kind of what the academy is doing from a transfer target perspective, along with the squad. So, um, we can kick it off, I guess, at the top. 8 new scholars. It's officially official. Who is joined the rankings, and kind of give us the breakdown of why this is important.
Right. So it's important because at the start of every season, uh, academies up and down the country will award scholarships to players who have graduated their under 16 age group, which in the United Kingdom is the end of their formal required secondary education. They've turned 16, and at a time where the majority of them these days will be moving into A level education. These boys are doing the equivalent. They are now becoming scholarship footballers, an academy like Chelsea that leads to a professional contract on the 17th birthday, which at that point you're under no obligation to pursue further education. You're encouraged to continue with your studies. But in this case, these boys are essentially now full time footballers at Chelsea. Such is the way that the EPPP and youth development program in England has gone over the last 10 years. The majority of them have been closer to that than many of their peers because clubs can take control of schooling from the age of 14 onwards. These boys have been through the school program at Chelsea, which means they're around Cobham every day and splitting their time between the classroom and the training pitch. And at this point, it becomes far more football oriented. They all go into Hassan Suleiman's under 18 squad as first years under 17s for the coming season. You'll be familiar with one or two of them from last season in particular because they were regular. So Keanu Dyer played most of the season as a midfielder for the 18s. Frankie Runham played all over the place, but mostly as a forward for the under 18s, scored in the under 19 Champions League and the fourth youngest player to ever do so when he was 15. So those two are the prominent ones, and the others is a nice spread of positions, international youth recognition, some signings from other clubs over the last few years. A couple of them have come right through from youth development phase, right at the youngest early age group, and they'll go into a squad that finished last season really well under Suleiman and will be vying for honours as they always do.
Yeah, you have a great little run up here. We'll put a link in the description, but maybe give us an idea. Is there a minimum? Is there a maximum number that they can have? Is 8 kind of the norm?
Eight's quite small for Chelsea. There isn't a maximum number of scholars that you can have. What the Premier League age group rules do is limit you to a maximum number of players within that age group, and it's more of a thing for the younger groups. When you get to this age, you're allowed a combined 30 scholarship players between under 17 and under 18. But as soon as these boys sign their pro contracts at 17, they come off that list, and there are no limits on the number of professionals you can have, for example. So last year, Chelsea had 16 first year scholars. It was a really strong intake that they wanted to keep the majority of their under 16s. This year, less so. They've got 8, which is one of the smaller ones in the last few years, but they've got options from front to back. We can run through them. Kai Crampton will come in as an option in goal, following in the footsteps of Ted Kurd and Max Merrick and Luke Campbell last year. He's another England youth international goalkeeper who's been involved at 15, 16, 17 for his country. Hasn't made his under 18 debut yet because of the competition ahead of him. You and I speak every time about the unbelievable depth chart that the academy and the club has in goal in particular. And so he's had to bide his time a little bit, but again, he'll get plenty of opportunities to play this season. In defence, you've got Genesis Antwi, who's mostly a right back who can also play as a centre half. He's represented England and Sweden at under 16 level. He's mostly on the right side. Over on the left, you've got Sahid Olagunju. He's a really tall, rangy centre half. Um, Still got some physical developing to do. As when you're a young boy with a really big frame like that, you can appear a little bit uncoordinated when you're not actually uncoordinated. It just takes time for everything to settle down. He'll have an imposing frame to lead with in the years to come. You move into midfield, obviously Dyer's very experienced, and you'd expect him to push on to development squad football mid-season, perhaps. It depends, but he looked very, very assured as an under 16 last year. I've forgotten to mention Marcel Washington as the left-sided fullback, wing-back option. He's another England youth international. He gets up and down in the same way you expect all Chelsea fullbacks or wing-backs of recent years. And he'll go into competition with Somto Boniface on the left side, be it fullback, wing-back, or further forward. Dyer joined from West Brom at the end of his under 14 season. Chelsea went shopping again at Albion shortly after to get Leo Cardoso from them. Like Antwi, he's a youth international for two countries, England and Portugal in his case. Missed a lot of time last season with injury and hopefully is over that, but played a couple of under 18s games, scored twice away to Norwich. So there's a lot of promise and a lot of talent there. Frankie Runnan, we've spoken about, very, very capable forward type who also saw some time at wing back last season. He was the one that a lot of people were talking about and not signing his scholarship because he was attracting a lot of interest from elsewhere. Chelsea didn't lose anybody in that regard this year. They kept him. They kept everybody they wanted to keep. And the last one we haven't mentioned is Sean Wade, who's a bit more of an old school, shorter, stockier, diminutive winger. Can go both ways off both feet. He came from Bristol City at the end of his under 14 season, has represented Ireland youth age group level, but is also eligible for England. And they are all these modern sorts of players that you can see slotting in seamlessly into this under 18 group and bolstering the level of competition.
Yeah, I think just being able to pick these kids, get them contracts is really exciting. You hear a lot of the different places. It's literally top to bottom on the team, right? Which is good. There's a lot of variety, which is what we come to expect from Cobham. Cobham don't do a thing. There's nothing cookie cutter about it. So I'm excited to kind of see how these, graduates work their way in.
It's the foundation of every club's academy to provide the majority of your under 18 age group from your own produce. It's an even more competitive market these days, and clubs will go out and they'll attempt to sign the very best of the best. England youth international, certainly among the Manchester Cities, Manchester Uniteds, Arsenal's, Chelsea's, Tottenham's. Newcastle are now on the scene trying to make a splash in that way. Southampton will always do it. Tottenham will do it. And because of the limits that clubs have faced on recruitment since Brexit came in, not being able to get top 16-year-olds from Europe in the same way that Chelsea did with Ian Martson and Nathan Ake and Andreas Christensen and so many other predecessors, you're all shopping in the same pool. So Chelsea faced competition to try to get Frankie Runner, but they've also tried to get players from other clubs, and other clubs have outbid them in some places, and Chelsea balked at the price for some of them in other situations. But there'll always be the interest in trying to add players from the outside, as Chelsea have done here by bringing in Cardoso and Dyer and Wade in particular over the last 2 and 3 years. But focusing, we've seen the Youth Cup winning teams, we've seen the graduates go into the first team and win the Champions League. Having a Reece James at the club who's gone from foundation phase 6, 7, 8-year-olds all the way through the system, carry it into the first team. That's the dream. That's the benchmark for every club up and down the country. And it's an exciting time of year for clubs, players, staff, academy members. We always say it takes a village to raise a player, and it's nice to see them get their moments, and the real work begins now.
Without a doubt. It's funny, like the academy season's always the breaks are a little bit shorter in the off season, but during the season there seem to be a few more. We were kind of talking about how there's gonna be less matches this season. Did you just want to touch on the last season? It was U23s to U21s. Right now it's like less matches. It seems like there's constant change with these groups.
There is, and in Chelsea's case in particular, this season we lose the under 19 Champions League because Chelsea didn't qualify for the Champions League, and the youth team didn't win their domestic league. So they'll be on the outside looking in at a competition that they've got a close affinity with, haven't performed as well as they'd liked in the last few editions, but hopefully it's a one-off and they'll return in 2024-25 in a new look format, because the Champions League itself is changing to the Swiss model. The UEFA Youth League is following suit in a roundabout way. The fixtures will mirror the Champions League, but they'll get rid of the last three of them. They just play the first six that the men's first team are playing. But the Swiss model is a useful segue into discussions about how the PL2 is changing this year. For 4 or 5, maybe 6 years now, they've split the 25, 26 odd Category 1 teams into a Division 1 and Division 2, with relegation and promotion between the two. Obviously, Chelsea had the fabled relegation battle of 21-22, staying up on the last minutes of the last day with the Joe Haig goal. You never want to be involved in a relegation battle again. Well, the clubs have collectively taken that decision out of Chelsea's hands anyway by moving towards the Swiss model. So all 26 Category 1 clubs will be in a single league table next season. Teams will play 20 fixtures in a seeded system. So you play 5 other teams home and away, depending on your average finish over the last 3 years. So Chelsea will probably end up alongside Manchester City and Arsenal and Everton, the usual top end, because despite their relegation season, they've been second or third for the rest of the qualifying run. You then play a selection of other teams. 16 of the 26 will go into an end of season playoff, high versus low seed. So you get a guaranteed 20 games. You could, if you're doing well, end up with 24, 25, 26, whatever. But it's fewer guaranteed games on that front. No under 19 Champions League. So you will definitely see Chelsea get creative with their games program for the under 21s in particular this season, whether that manifests itself in them entering the Premier League Cup or the Premier League International Cup, or building a bespoke schedule of international friendlies like they finished last season with trips to Leipzig and Wolfsburg and Monaco and Glasgow Rangers. They can go around and fill it in that way, and they may do a mix and match, but watch this space for that, because they're definitely a change that will see fewer matches for an age group that needs more of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely interested to see how it all shakes out, which is exciting. We're going to take a first ad break when we get back. We got some new signings to talk about. So thank you to the sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right, Phil, that's right. We're teasing the new signings. I guess, like, we know that there are some that are definitely for the academy, but then there's some that are kind of like on the edge. You don't really know where they're going to go. How are you viewing a few of the young players that Chelsea have signed recently? Where they're going to land?
There's 2 that are almost certainly the development squad, and a third that I think will be. So Alex Matos is the first one. That's been done for a while. He comes in as a free agent from Norwich City after a successful trial at the end of last season. He's an under 19 going into the season. He formerly forward of some denomination, centre forward, plays wide. More recently converted into a box-to-box attacking 8 type, and how Chelsea use him remains to be seen. They used him as an 8 during his trial period and friendlies against Charlton Athletic, but that versatility is something that runs through Cobham from every age group. We've seen a myriad of players can play in every different position, so it's the more you can do definitely helps the academy. He comes in and will help bolster an age group that is going to lose a significant number of players from last season, because it's the next steps to take in their careers. They'll go on loan, they'll move on to bigger, better things. Ishe Samuel-Smith comes in from Everton for £4 million reported, a year after the club tried really, really hard to get him as part of the scholarship intake, in the same way we were just talking about, trying to supplement your own homegrown produce with the best England youth internationals around. They weren't able to get him last summer. They have now brought him in. He's a left-sided defender of some acclaim. Despite being 17 years old, he'll play for the development squad this season. He'll be part of the Youth Cup team that on paper looks like the England under-17 team. I put a tweet out last week that there was an England under-17 team from last season where 7 of them are now at Chelsea, and an 8th one, Tyler Dibbling, had a brief flirtation with the club before returning to Southampton. You add 1 or 2 others like Michael Golding and Zonta Boniface who weren't in that team, and you could theoretically put an entire England under-17 team out in the Youth Cup next season. He'll play development squad, left-sided centre-half, or left back, or left wing back. He can do all of those things in the same way that someone like Zach Sturge can do and Dylan Williams can do, and both did last season. It theoretically frees one or both of those up to go on to the next stage of their development. But he's a high class, high quality young international who was on the first team bench at the back end of last season for an Everton team struggling against relegation. Didn't make his debut, had an earlier opportunity in I think the Carabao Cup and didn't. But they'd have loved to keep hold of him. Their financial situation is so perilous that they couldn't really turn down the 4 million that Chelsea put on the table. It's dog eat dog in football, and Chelsea capitalised on a situation to go and get a player they've wanted for a long, long time. The one who we're less certain about, but I think we'll stick with the dev squad, is Diego Moreira, who's come in from Benfica, a very lively attacking winger, very much in the sort of mould of an Amari Hutchinson or a Tudor Mendel-Adowu. And there's no Amari Hutchinson. As we speak, he's looking like he's tying up a loan to an EFL team, possibly Ipswich Town. Harvey Vale spent the back end of the second half of last season in the development squad. Those two will be off on loan, doing good things. Mendel-Adowu's future looks like it's lying elsewhere outside of Chelsea. So you're losing those types of forwards. You bring in someone like Moreira, who on paper fits what they do like a glove, has some of the productivity, has been on the fringes of Benfica's first team squad, not quite had a breakthrough there, seeking his fame and fortune elsewhere. I think he'll stick with the dev squad for at least the first half of the season. He's on the plane. He's one of the 29 that's flown out with Pochettino's group to the United States, which is possibly a precondition of signing, I speculate, but also a nice way to help assimilate and integrate into the club. Not necessarily with the development squad that he might be spending his time with, but it shows a value to him individually. The bigger picture we'll get into in a little bit about how it all comes together. But certainly, I think for the first half of this season, there's an opening within the group vacated by the two or three that we've just mentioned, for him to come in and be impactful at PL2 level, to raise the level of the PL2 team, to be one of the first cabs off the rank for a favourable early season League Cup tie. He's got competition ahead of him, behind him, but looks like he can bring something to the table.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how it all shakes out, especially. I mean, is it as easy as like Amari Hutchinson loan out, Diego Moreira in, kind of for that tricky unlocking winger, kind of easy one in, one out in that sense?
On paper for the development squad, absolutely. And in a sliding doors moment, if Mendel-Adowu, for example, had signed his pro deal a year ago and was now on the cusp of stepping up and taking the role vacated by Hutchinson and Vale, do you go out and sign Moreira? He's a free agent. It's kind of a shot to nothing. You haven't really wasted any time or resources by investigating a high quality prospect from one of the best academies in the world over in Benfica by trying. It's an opportunity that there's a void. There's an opportunity to get the talent. Let's bring him in. Who's to say whether it would have happened if Mendel-Adowu would have stepped up or may still? We don't know that, but the fact we're mid to late July and there's no further news on him signing, it doesn't bode well, shall we say. As a straight one in, one out for the dev squad, it's logical in the bigger picture how you manage the flow of Madueke ahead of him and Vale and Hutchinson developing alongside him and the next ones to come, and players that you sign for loaning out purposes, Angelo Gabriel from Santos, for example. How these all come together is a debate that we can have. We've been through this with the Michael Emenalo era. You throw enough mud at the wall and hope that something sticks to primarily make financial profit off, to sustain financial fair play. If some of those players, it just takes one to break the mold and to be good enough to make it in the men's first team, that would be great. We could roll the clock back 10 years and we could be talking about this same situation with Chelsea and signing Lucas Piazon from Brazil, Wallace, Nathan, Ulises Davila, Christian Cuevas, John Perez, Joao Rodriguez. That's just focusing on the South Americans. And there was the likes of Mario Pasalic and Stipe Perichka from Croatia. Chelsea got around, and those were different types of signings in the Emenalo era, from the Thibaut Courtois and Kevin De Bruyne's, who were clear high level prospects who, in Courtois' case, had a fairly distinguished short stay at Chelsea, and De Bruyne's was discarded way too soon with hindsight. Um, but the more speculative Angelo Gabriel and Diego Moreira and bringing in these other players from elsewhere, you're not. Yes, Gabriel's costing 10 to 15 million euros, but it's kind of small fry for Chelsea in terms of overall cost. They spent that last year on Cassidy. They spent it on Chukwuemeka. These are all sort of Lucas Piazon style deals. It's easy to say after the fact that Piazon wasn't in the same caliber, but he was always thought of that when he was signed. He was a really, really highly touted prospect. He had a good spell in the academy. He got the opportunities to break into the first team at Chelsea. Didn't work out to the hype that he received that's equivalent to some of the boys that are signing now, for example. But we've been here before. It's not new. It's not revelatory. It's fine to be excited by them all, but it's about understanding that you might have 7 or 8 of them lined up in a depth chart. Chelsea's just banking on one of them making it and 2 of them perhaps allowing them to turn a profit on the whole operation. That's the
Yeah.
way I see it anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a cynic's view. It's
Well,
as a fan of watching them, I'm going to be keen to see them develop individually and watch their careers develop. But the expectation that they're going to start a production line of all of these lot to end up in Pochettino's squad in 2026, 2027, if Pochettino is the manager at that point, who knows? That's where we need to get as closer to reality. This is primarily a talent accumulation exercise.
yeah, which we'll touch on in another aspect in a little bit. I mean, at this point, we're still a little bit early in the season. Do you think they're going to continue to do more deals? What is your kind of sense on other players that they're targeting? I mean, it seems like a couple of these have just kind of came and gotten done rather quickly.
Yeah, I think the Matos and Moreira ones were lined up for a while, and let's not forget, and it's quite easy to forget this because he doesn't have a profile on the website despite signing in January. Jimmy J Morgan came in from Southampton. He immediately had knee surgery, but he's been back in training with the under 21s all summer. Much like Isha Samuel Smith, they're both eligible for the youth team and for the FA Youth Cup this year, but he'll also be in that group. Um, and that one almost came out of nowhere. So at any given moment throughout the summer, Chelsea will be working on deals to just much like these to go out and get somebody. We go back to the scholars discussion we had at the start. They may want to add to the group with players who are yet to commit. A couple of them quite notable under 16 internationals who were not part of the scholarship announcements at their old clubs. More likely to go somewhere else, but Chelsea will keep trying for these boys. I wouldn't expect a mass level of recruitment now for the development squad, given that the season starts for them in earnest in just under a month from now. And the preseason campaign is like you want to keep the group tight and you want to keep it familiar. Yes, they've lost a couple of players who are going on the US tour, but the core of it will stay together. You might see 1, maybe 2 added depending on offers they get for players that are in. The more of them that go out on loan, they might think, okay, we're a little bit weak here in midfield. There's an opportunity for us to go out and get this player. Should we pull the trigger on it? But I think in Matos Moreira and Samuel Smith, that's the core of the business we'll see this summer.
Well, I'm going to keep an eye out. I don't put anything past the club. They love a good deal. And not only have they done incomings, the outgoings seem to be flowing a little bit as well. Dattro, David Fofana going to Union Berlin. He'll be playing Champions League football.
It's good somebody will from Chelsea this season. Yeah, he's definitely hit the jackpot there in a way. I don't think he's guaranteed minutes. I think Sherardo Becker's going to be holding on to the main starting job there. But we've seen Dattro offer enough glimpses of potential. Obviously, his run at Mulder was good. He had some fleeting appearances in the Chelsea shirt, both for the men's first team and the development squad, where you could see the talent that had been brought in. He did well for Cote d'Ivoire at the Toulon tournament back in May. And he goes into an environment that will allow him to take the next step, whether he ends up as a future Chelsea men's first team player or sold on for profit. We'll see. But he certainly has the platform and the stage to go into next season to show A, why Chelsea signed him, and B, why Chelsea should view him as a potential striking option of the future. There's enough there to work with. but it's a necessary bridge move for him. Jumping from the Norwegian top flight to the Premier League isn't something that many, if any, players can do or should do. I'm not drawing any direct comparisons to the talent, but let's not forget Erling Haaland was also a Mulder striker of some acclaim and had two steps to the Austrian Bundesliga and then the German Bundesliga before he was in the position to join the elite in the Premier League. So, by way of comparison, Dattro's not gone to the Austrian Bundesliga; he's gone straight into the German Bundesliga. Doesn't mean he's going to be on the same development curve. It's just the necessary sort of step you'll take as a bridge league before getting into the big time at the levels at which Chelsea aspire to play at.
Well, I'm excited to see how that works. By the way, I think that's just from what we can tell, high potential. Charlie Webster has sealed his move early. Obviously, we were talking about contracts up and down last season, maybe even for a couple seasons, but it seems like it's smoothed out a little bit.
I think so. It's been unconfirmed, but a lot of the talk around the move, he's gone on loan to Herenveen in the Eredivisie, is that when he signed his new contract in January, which would take him through to the summer of 2024, it had an option year in it. So Chelsea are generally unwilling to loan players out in the last year of their deal if they believe that player has a future at the club. It's not something they won't do, for example. They did it last year with Sam McClelland at Barrow, and he left as a free agent in the summer after a good spell there. But in Charlie's case, they clearly think that he's a potential talent for the future if everything marries up. He's gone to Herenveen. That was accompanied by a nice 7 or 8 minute video that the club produced on his journey so far, and interviews with Charlie and his parents, and just tracking his journey. It's still on the website now, and I'd encourage people to watch it because it's a nice insight into the player. He's a really good kid, really nice family, and really excited to see what he can do in the Eredivisie because that has proven to be a valuable first step for academy footballers in England to go out and get some experience in the professional game. The Eredivisie isn't particularly physical or aggressive as a league as a whole, so the intensity to step up with Mason Mount, for example, played Vitesse and then went to Derby in the Championship. And some players, we see Reece James went straight to the Championship. Some players don't need that, but where Reece was physically capable of handling his own, Charlie might be, but you want to take that step to get him into the professional and senior environment at Herenveen in a good league, a technically strong league, one that will allow him to express himself and show off what he does really well, while learning all of the dark arts, as Eddie Newton would always call them, about how to handle yourself playing a 34-game season plus cups, and preparing yourself for 2 games a week at a higher physical level, so that the next step you take, let's say, is the Championship in 24-25, you're not thrown in at the deep end. You've got some foundation underneath you that's taken you out of the academy bubble into a meaningful senior environment, and you've prepared yourself to take on bigger and better challenges. I think he's going to be perfect for Herenveen, perfect for the Eredivisie, and there'll be more than a few highlight compilations of his individual performances moving forward. I think he'll do really well there.
Yeah, I'm excited. What about Teddy Sharman Lowe? You got Dion Rankin, a couple more in progress, but at least we can kind of touch on them. Chelsea only taking 5 goalkeepers to America.
Only 5, and Teddy isn't one of them. When we spoke at the last time, we were talking about the next steps for the goalies who'd been out on loan, and Teddy and Eddie Beach were both on loan in the National League South last season, having on Waterlooville and Chelmsford, respectively. We supposed that they would take the next step to National League, one division above, or should they be going out on loan? And that's exactly what Teddy's done. He's gone to Bromley, who Chelsea played last pre-season, retained decent relationships with. He signed on the same day as another goalkeeper. They signed Grant Smith, who's the veteran, and they'll compete between the two of them for the starting job. You probably think that the veteran has the inside track, but Teddy's really good. And sometimes non-league clubs will bring in the veteran as sort of an emergency measure in case the youngster struggles, knowing that they can turn to the safe pair of hands, the veteran, to fill in or to deputise and take the pressure off him a little bit. I think Teddy will get his opportunities there. The interesting thing about Bromley is that their manager is a former goalkeeper and a former goalkeeper coach of high acclaim, Andy Woodman, who's worked at very high levels for club and country. His son, Freddie, is a noted goalkeeper, former youth international for England, enjoying a strong career himself. And as Teddy said in his welcome interview at Bromley, it's rare that you'll be able to talk to your manager about the intricacies and specificities of goalkeeping. It's usually you focus with your goalie coach, and they've got a good goalie coach there, Brandon Daly. But having the support and understanding of a manager who knows exactly what goes through a goalkeeper's mind from day to day, game to game, isn't something you'll get everywhere else. I think Teddy will have that as a real advantage to his development. Switch back to Eddie Beach. The talk today is that he'll be sticking around Chelsea for the season, or at least for the first half. If Chelsea aren't signing competition for Kepa, then everybody bumps up with Edouard Mendy gone now. So Kepa becomes the one, Bettinelli becomes the two, and you want your three to be somebody who can play development squad, but also travel with the men's first team and be the third goalie on occasion, continue to learn, continue to develop. He's a Wales under-21 international, so that's good. It signals that they want Gaga Slonina to go out on loan rather than be that third choice goalie. You'd have Lucas Bergstrom go out. Jamie Cumming is getting to an age where, like Nathan Baxter, who's now moved on to Bolton, you might think he's moving permanently, although he is part of this tour to the US in the first place. So it'd be interesting. Eddie may move on to a loan mid-season like he did last year, but their paths diverge a little bit here. Teddy's gone out on loan. Eddie's sticking around with Chelsea, and we can use them as a little comparison as to which route is better for a young goalkeeper at this stage of their career, go and play or learn in the elite environment.
Always a juggling act. Goalkeepers love minutes. It'll be good for them to travel, see what it's like. I'm liking the loans, getting ahead of it. They're going to have full preseason with these teams. There's still more going on. What I would say before we hit our last break is that a few players have not gone on the US tour that you would expect because, according to Simon Johnson of The Athletic, Phil, you already knew this, they want them to get properly placed in their loans, no disruptions. They said it's actually better that we do not send them to the United States. Let's keep them here and let them get their loan deals figured out. We have what? Amari,
And Harvey
Cassidy,
Vale, Cassidy. Cassidy is on the
Vale.
plane. Cassidy is on the plane to the US, which is one of those.
Ironically,
We hear the story put out there, and that's perhaps the spin put on it. Before we get into that, I just want to acknowledge Dion Rankin's loan to Exeter City. He's gone off to his first loan. Really good move for him as well. I know I've said this a lot, but he's proven repeatedly in the EFL Trophy that he can play to a high standard against League One opposition. He's now going into a League One club. Figures to replace Josh Key, who they've lost this summer, as the right wing back in their wing-back formation. He played really well against Exeter the season before last in the same in the EFL Trophy. He'll be a known commodity to them. Would have been a player that's in demand. He'll go out there and really excite their fans. But yeah, so Amari and Harvey Vale are two examples of not being on the plane, perhaps at the expense of Diego Moreira and Angelo Gabriel, two players who play roughly the same positions. It's fine if the plan is, yes, we've sorted you your loan, get into pre-season. I wouldn't say nice and early because EFL clubs have been back for 2-3 weeks already. Ideally, you go in on day dot and you spend the entire pre-season with them rather than arriving midway through to try to play catch up. But it is what it is. It's a good argument to say yes, but then it becomes a little bit divisive if some aren't and some are. We'll go through the 29-man squad shortly, I imagine, but someone like Cassidy is widely expected to be going on loan this season, but is currently with Pochettino's squad. There's a couple of other players that you can make the same case with. Mason Burstow is in the US as well, and he's likely to be going out on loan this season. So it's an argument that can be used, but only consistently and widespread. Otherwise, you end up with a little bit of hypocrisy. Why are these boys not on the plane when their level of talent and their performance last season justifies an argument for inclusion? If you say yes, they're going on loan, everything's being sorted, fine. Well, does that not count for everybody who's in the same boat? And there's a positional need to it. There's a balancing act to be had, but certainly you don't want, for example, Cassidy to be pulled from the squad mid-tour. I think some of the boys going to the US will be pulled mid-tour. They'll return early. It's just, it doesn't necessarily add up to me that you can say that some players aren't traveling because they want their loans done nice and early because they're expected to go on loan, but there's others you're taking who won't be playing in the Premier League this season and will be going on loan.
all right. Take a quick ad break. When we get back, a lot more to go. I love this, Phil. We're running it down. Thank you to the sponsors. I'll be right back. All right. We talked about Angelo and Gabriel. We haven't really talked about Strasbourg and kind of the effects of everything, Phil. Obviously, you've tweeted, I've tweeted. I'm being a little shithousery with my Twitter handle and avatar being the Strasbourg
You're a Blue
logo.
Co shareholder.
And yeah, my handle being a Blueco shareholder. That was how I came back to Twitter after taking a hiatus after the absolutely shocking end of the season. You and I have talked quite a bit. Positives for Chelsea. You're going to have a few different clubs around Europe and potentially in hotbeds around the world where you can easily move players. This is a more formal version of the Vitesse relationship. Mason
It
Mount went
is.
there.
Yeah,
Um, about 8 players went there, have done some things. Even Eduardo, as a goalkeeper, went there for coaching and things like that.
he did. Yeah, it was a lengthy list of nearly 30 players over a decade that ended up at Vitesse, and uh, Nemanja Matic was there in his first spell as a Chelsea player before going to Benfica, before coming back. Uh, we could rattle off the names from Vitesse, and plenty of people would be like, "Oh, I completely forgot he existed." Um, but Strasbourg's an interesting one, as you say, not least because the French Ligue 1 is a higher standard of football than the Eredivisie with respect to both leagues. And you're absolutely right that it presents opportunities for Chelsea to loan players into a high level environment. And if not loan, use advantageous relationships to their advantage. So Strasbourg this last weekend dropped 20 million euros on Abaka Silla from Club Brugge. Huge deal. I think a club record deal. Certainly not money they would have spent before the Blueco takeover. He's not a Chelsea player in any official capacity, but if that 20 million euro signing becomes a 40 million euro defender in the next 18 to 24 months, as Ligue 1 is a noted centre back development league of some acclaim. Chelsea have spent quite a bit of money over the years on young centre halves coming out of there. Right now, they have Wesley Fofana via Leicester. They've got Benoit Badiashile via Monaco. They had Kurt Zuma. We could go on and on. It would be easy for Chelsea to strike a deal with Strasbourg for a player that proved to be Premier League ready, and yet not on loan. There are new FIFA loan limitations that you can have 7 international loans in any given season, and a maximum of 3 players in or out from one club. And I think Chelsea obviously know that, so I don't think there'll be a queue of players from Cobham heading over to Strasbourg. I think it's going to be the likes of Angelo Gabriel and signings that you immediately place at a convenient place in Europe to help them settle. You and I spoke offline about this. Strasbourg is kind of conveniently located in that regard, not for the 50-kilometer radius recruitment taking you into Germany as well as France and perhaps reaching a little bit further north as well, but because of the unique culture of the Alsace region, you're close to a number of different areas that a prospective, let's say, South American signing can find somewhere that is to their liking to allow them to settle down a bit more comfortably in a new continent. Um, and this is also why they're looking into a Portuguese partnership. We've talked about Rio Ave or Portimonense. It's very, very easy by comparison for a South American talented youngster to spend their adaptation period in Portugal for a host of cultural reasons. This is why the club are doing it first and foremost. And then we go back to the discussion about the speculative signings, and if one or two of them hit, and if you turn a 5 million euro signing into a 30 million sale, then it's kind of free money. It's we live in the era of multi-club ownership. Chelsea, I think, are the 14th Premier League club of 20 to have multiple ownership structures within their wider network. Bournemouth have done it. Bournemouth have only been back in the Premier League 2 years. Bill Foley, bought Bournemouth. 6 weeks later, he bought a majority share or controlling share in Lorient in France. Everyone's at it, and as much as I don't think it's good for the game right now, while the legislation allows you to do so, if you can't beat them, join them, and it behooves Chelsea to be part of the multi-club strategy right now. UEFA and FIFA will probably move to limit it at some point, because that seems Chelsea's involvement seems to be the trigger for changing legislation left, right, and centre. But yeah, we can't. I'll take it as my personal view that I don't think it should happen, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be intrigued and excited by some of the potential of it. There'll be Strasbourg fans who are for it. There'll be Strasbourg fans who are vehemently against it. That's kind of the nature of the beast in football. And we'll see how it unfolds. If it's advantageous for Strasbourg, some of those dissenters will probably be won over. If it goes disastrously, then there'll be a lot of noise about Chelsea's involvement. So we watch and we wait and we see with open eyes and open ears, as I always say. It's certainly intriguing in a different way to Vitesse, because, as you said, there was no formal ownership or connection. It was a relationship built out of connections between the two clubs' owners. The independence was retained. Vitesse benefited from some good loans. They suffered some bad loans. And that's probably going to be the case with Strasbourg as well.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised, like you said, it won't be as much in the way of a pipeline back and forth. I also understand why you don't necessarily need it, right? There's opportunities here domestically. It's more of a European gateway pipeline thing like that. So that's a great clarification. And we'll have to see for sure how it goes.
It's one of those things, as you don't have to own the player officially to benefit from it. Manchester City moved players all around their stable of City Football Group clubs. There's 10 of them or 12 of them now, and almost none of them will ever see the pitch at the Etihad Stadium. But that doesn't mean that Girona buy a player, or Palermo buy a player, or New York City buy a player. If one of those players suddenly hits the big time, they're in the City ecosystem. It's very, very easy to convince somebody to swap one pale blue, light blue shirt for another light blue shirt. And in Chelsea's case, it will be one royal blue Strasbourg shirt for one royal blue Chelsea shirt. And the game is the game. Bournemouth, I go back to Bournemouth. They've done it with Romain Favre. They've signed him from Lorient, or they're loaning him back there. He'll go to Bournemouth inside the next 18 months. You just move them around.
Yeah. Look, I now have access to more kits I can buy instead of just buying the same Chelsea kit over and over.
I'm certainly happy that it's a blue
I'm
club.
excited.
I don't want to go into a partnership with a club that wears red. I could never really get on board with that. Black and gold and black and yellow with Vitesse. That was fine by me. It's not red.
Oh, I appreciate it. Keep it tight on that. It's so funny they'll probably do it. All right, let's go ahead and touch on US Tour. You said the squad's full of kids. What are we going to expect? What are we going to look out for? I put this in yesterday's pod, Phil. I think, too many pods going on right now. I think this is going to be a lot like when Antonio Conte was there in 2016. We saw essentially a new team a team at the beginning of the game and a new almost wholesale changes new team at halftime. We saw players, because we got to go to open training, they were doing sprints along the sidelines. After the game, they would do conditioning, right? It was just like they were there hyper focused on getting very, very fit to do a lot of running in that season. They really weren't there to implement a system or play beautiful soccer. Conte was like, you will run into the ground and we will do 2-a-days every single day. Obviously, last summer, Tuchel, it was a mess. Players wanted to leave, way too many sponsorship and PR and media duties. It was a lot of distractions. The players were struggling to get fitness. Again, we had allegedly Group 1, Group 2. It was just bad news bears. I think Poch is going to go back to a Conte-style preseason. Everybody together, everybody running, working hard, a lot of minutes shared across a lot of players, where you might see some goofy positions of players because they just need 45 minutes over playing their natural position. That was my prediction. You, with the expertise of the players that did go, an idea of what Poch is about and things like that. How are you viewing the summer tour? I know last year we had that youth tournament in Salt Lake, Billy Gilmore and someone else, and I think Harvey Vale got shipped out in the middle.
Yeah,
is a mess.
I think you're on the right lines. I think it's certainly going to be closer to an Antonio Conte preseason, and I think there will be a defined first team and second team for the majority of these games, with the exception of the Wrexham game. With no disrespect to Wrexham, they are a newly promoted fourth tier side. Chelsea's development squad play third, fourth tier sides in the EFL Trophy, so a lot of the youngsters that they carry with them on this should hope to see minutes in that game more than in the series against Premier League teams or against Dortmund. And I think they will. And you can then break down it's 29 players in the travelling party. Dewan Richards won't be playing. He's there for training only. I think it's a condition of his visa, which is slightly strange just because he's been spent the last month playing for Jamaica in the Gold Cup within the same country. But I'm no expert on visa intricacies. He had a really interesting Gold Cup, actually. He had a few lively cameo performances from the bench and scored a goal. Be exciting to see what comes next for him. So you immediately reduce it to 28 with him, and then you've got 5 goalies. And let's say you use 2 goalies a game. You take 3 away. Now you've got to 25, and you've almost got a first 11 and a second 11 with some excess on the side. What immediately leapt off the page to me was that Lewis Hall was included in the group of midfielders rather than the group of defenders, which is slightly by necessity. If you've got Ben Chilwell, Mark Cucurella, and Ian Matson among your defenders, carrying a fourth in Hall as a left back is entirely unnecessary. So you would hope to see him get some minutes in midfield and at left back, because if he's going to be an option for Chelsea at left back this season, you want him to get meaningful preseason minutes there as well. You don't want to play him in midfield for all 5 preseason games and then exclusively use him as a left back when the football starts for real in August. But we'll see Enzo partnered by just about everybody else. Conor Gallagher will go alongside him. Carney will go alongside him. Andre Santos, Cassidy, and Lewis. They'll all get a go as you try to figure out what the plan B is if Moises Caicedo doesn't end up in a Chelsea shirt by August 31st. And it doesn't even have to be plan B. It's about giving yourself options throughout the course of the season. Who is most suited to playing in the quote unquote double pivot? And it's probably the inside track to Santos and Hall there, with a nod to Gallagher because he can and has done it at youth levels. It's not necessarily something that comes naturally to his instincts as a box to box type player, and everything we've seen from him in a Chelsea shirt is better going forward than with the game behind him or around him. But we can see he's a high level England senior international rather, who's played for 3 Premier League clubs to a high standard. I think you can trust him and educate him to do that in the same way that Pochettino did at Tottenham with Harry Winks and 2 other youngsters who I've completely forgotten. So I'm going to look up their names.
I know. I just looked at your tweet too, and you completely baffled me as well. Because
Yeah,
we were just
it's one of those
talking.
weird things. It was Ryan Mason, Oliver Skipp, Harry Winks, a little bit for Tom Carroll, and Nabil Bentaleb isn't English, but he came through the Tottenham Academy, and we spoke about this when Pochettino was hired in May, that he demonstrated that he's willing to give opportunities to perhaps unheralded central midfield options, because within the framework and system that he puts in place and the trust he puts into those players, you can have some really impressive productions. So whether it is Connor, whether it is Chukwuemeka, whether it's Santos or Hall, I think Cassidy is unlikely to partner him there long term. But whoever it is, we've seen a track record of improvement and good coaching for central midfielders. So that's something to look out for in pre-season. There's a lot of youngsters, as you say. Some of them may not see the pitch for very long. And I think as you get towards the Dortmund game, you start giving 75 minutes. You'll start with 45 and 45, then you go to 60-30, 65-35, whatever, 25 rather, move along, so that by the time you get to Dortmund, you've got your starting 11 for the opening day sort of set, 75-80 there, and then you bring in the ones that are still remaining. I think you will see 2 or 3 of this group leave earlier to go back to do other things. Cassidy, if he gets a loan sorted out, Burster, if he has a loan sorted out, Alfie Gilchrist, same situation. He's got a chance because Fofana hasn't travelled. You've got Thiago Silva, you've got Chalobah, you've got Colwill, you've got Humphreys, and you've got Gilchrist as your 5 centre halves. I think Gilchrist, he had a fantastic season as captain of the Dev squad last year, but he is 5th in the pecking order there. If he has a good loan opportunity come up or whatever, he'll be able to say that, but it'd be nice to see him get minutes against Wrexham, for example. You don't need to roll Thiago Silva out against Wrexham. You might want to get 15, 20 minutes in his legs to get them going again in a match environment. But the Wrexham game is the one where you want to give as many of these kids some exposure in a Pochettino team, and then start moving through the 5 friendlies to get to a point where at the end of the day you've got Sterling, Nkunku, Enzo, Reece James, hopefully when he's over his sickness, all of these boys getting 4 minutes, so they're getting ready for the opening day. It's going to be interesting though, because it's one of the youngest and weirdest looking traveling groups that Chelsea have ever sent on a pre-season tour. And I'm looking at names, Gabriel and Diego Moreira. We've spoken about them multiple times in this episode. We don't know very much, if anything, about what they can do. We know that Gabriel has played some 120, 130 times for Santos by the age of 18, which is a staggering number of games, even if some of those were in the Copa do Brasil or the Paulista State Championship against amateur or semi-pro teams. It's still a lot of football to have been played by that age. Is he along for the ride? Is he going to play meaningful minutes? It's a tour of real unknowns, and there's still a lot of questions without answers about this squad. But that doesn't have to be taken in a negative way, because there are opportunities for so many players here to stake a claim and to show that they belong.
Absolutely. And guess what? We'll be there almost every single step of the way to cover it and keep you all posted. If you have not, follow us on social media, subscribe on YouTube. A lot of content is going to be coming out over the next weeks. Nick and Dan are in North Carolina as you're listening to this. Ishan and Jake on their way. Actually, they're probably there already too. It's only me that's missing North Carolina. I apologize, but I will meet up with the group in Philly. Phil, we're excited. Whatever you need, let us know. We got you covered. We're going to be doing the minutes, getting some photos, hyping up these academy kids, these academy graduates, and hoping they go on to have the best careers ever. Don't worry. We got an eye out for them, even though most people are going to be worried about, Thiago Silva, Enzo. I got you. Don't worry.
And we got something for everybody here. You guys have got the first team nailed down stateside. Back over here in England, the development squad got a series of preseason games themselves against National League opposition. As I said, Tuesday evening, as this goes out, Boreham Wood kicks us off, and then they're at Barnet on Saturday the 22nd. Back down to our friends at Aldershot on Tuesday the 25th, where they played so many development squad and under 21 games over the years. And then on the 29th, they're away to Ebbsfleet. There's a couple of other games to come back at Cobham after that. The under-18s have got their own stuff going on. They kicked off with a behind closed doors game in Spain. They play Club Brugge. They've got Kingstonian. They've got a mini tournament with Newcastle, Manchester City. That's all going on here. You got it locked down stateside. We've got something for everybody.
Divide and conquer. Don't forget the Women's World Cup as well. So Jesse and Abdullah rocking on that. Wow. We're going to wrap there, though. Hope you've enjoyed it. Again, if you're stateside, check it out. If you're at one of the locations, we will be there. Live pods, all tour. Man, I'm excited. But until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.